Well, now about 7 o'clock, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. Also publicly thank the Village of Menomonee Falls for letting us use the boardroom today. I'm Sensenbrenner, your congressman, and up here with me is State Representative Janelle Branchen, who represents most of Menomonee Falls and is here to listen to your questions and comments about what is going on in Madison while I try to do the same on federal issues. Let me read an announcement of what the rules are going to be for this meeting so we're all clear on that. I appreciate the opportunity to hear your concerns. In fact, in 2017, I held 115 public meetings, and I've logged close to 50 so far this year. You may have heard that some of these meetings have become very contentious, so I want to be sure to review the rules we need to adhere to so that we can have an orderly environment in which to exchange ideas. First, I ask you all to sign in with my staff. If you would like an opportunity to speak, you need to check the speaking box that appears on the sign-in slips. That way I'll know to call on you during the first portion of the meeting, which will be a discussion of general issues. I will be giving priority to those of you who reside in Menomonee Falls, and if time permits, I will continue to call on residents of the 5th District. If additional time is available, I will call on those who don't reside in the 5th District. This portion of the meeting will last about an hour and 20 minutes. I expect participants to be respectful and to allow the person who is recognized and has the floor the opportunity to speak without interruption, as well as when I respond to each comment. Further, if the question you'd like to ask or the comment you would like to make has already been made, please refrain from asking it again. We should try to hear from as many of you as we can within the time restraints. If at any time participants become rude or disruptive, I will immediately adjourn the meeting as there is nothing positive to be gained from continuing with a meeting that is disorderly. We can all disagree without being disagreeable. Signs are okay in this room as long as they are not disruptive or obstructive. The second portion of the meeting is devoted to those of you who seek my help with personal problems they are experiencing with the federal government. This part of the meeting is an opportunity for us to have a one-on-one private conversation and is not the time to continue discussions from the general issues part of the meeting. Any filming or recording is prohibited during this part of the meeting, and the reason for that is that a lot of times veterans come up and talk about problems that they have with VA medical, and there is no reason why this should be recorded or filmed and then get up on the internet for everybody to know what a veteran's medical problem is. So please adhere to that when we get to the second part of the meeting. So, without any further ado, first up in the first part of the meeting is Roger Johnson of Plain. Mr. Johnson.
Hello. Well, my concern basically concerns the second part of the meeting.
Okay, then wait till the second part of the meeting.
We'll do it then, okay.
Okay. Next up is Dan Schiffer,
Dave.
Maple Crest of Menomonee Falls.
Dave Schiffer. Yeah.
Schiffer.
Well, I got a whole list, but I'll try to read it down on a national level.
Could you please stand up?
On a national level, you know, we're looking at a job loss in the next 20 years of about 80 million or better, and even higher. Some of the statistics say loss to automation. You know, jobs that could come back, manufacturing jobs that could come back, would come back to be automated, not into our workforce. Milwaukee was a big manufacturing city. What are you doing on the federal level to, you know, try to head this off to some degree, and also training, STEM training for high schools, and then for the state, on the state level, I want to talk about safety in the schools. I mean, my kids are scared. I talk to them. I work at a school now. I ran a business for 30 years, but my kids are scared. I mean, I didn't think so, but then we were talking at family meetings, and they're afraid. And nobody's doing anything about it.
Well, first of all, let me say that the tax reform that was passed in December is bringing jobs back to America, because we had the highest marginal corporate tax rate in the world, and that's what encouraged corporate inversions and encouraged jobs to exodus the United States. And that, together with the fact that there is going to be an amnesty for bringing back money that multinationals kept overseas because they did not want to pay the repatriation tax, is actually helping investment in this country, creating jobs in this country, and providing more revenue for the federal government. For example, Apple, announced that they were going to bring back $360 billion that they had. They were going to be building more plants to build or manufacture their products here, and these are good paying jobs, and they estimate that it will create 20,000 jobs. They also will be paying $38 billion more in federal corporate income taxes that they wouldn't be paying if the tax reform hadn't passed, and they would have kept money overseas. Now, with respect to STEM education in the public schools in this state, state law says that textbooks, curriculum, and method of instruction are determined by the locally elected school board. So this is a local decision and not a federal decision, and really not a state decision to make. We have passed legislation to encourage STEM education, but again, actually getting it in the classroom in a public school in this state is going to require the local school board's approval. As far as school safety is concerned, we passed federal grant money to help harden schools and to bring retired police officers in to increase the safety. But again, this is a federal grant. It would be up to the local school districts to make the determination on whether to apply for a federal grant. I also can say that we have passed legislation that provides more money for the instant check system because a lot of the tragedies that have fallen through the cracks has become because some states in the military have not put the data in that would prevent somebody who would do others harm a block in the instant check system that would have blocked them from obtaining firearms or ammunition. And I'll defer to Representative Branchen for the state part of it.
So the state of Wisconsin has put $100 million into schools. As a matter of fact, those grants are coming. The deadline was Friday at midnight. Department of Justice has made a special section that will, special section of the Department of Justice just to handle schools. So schools are now reporting as far as what their evacuation plans, and then extra dollars was allowed for every school for the next 3 years. 3 years of participation into funding for school safety. So that was one of the special session issues that Governor Walker had taken up.
What kind of things are they implementing or allowing for that? Because it's always a dollar issue.
Sure.
You know,
Well, I want to let you know that we left it, the Department of Justice left it open really for the schools to determine how best it could be used. Cameras, security officers, all those things were left open to the schools because every school has a different footprint. Many of the schools were built earlier or later. And also to put things in perspective, Menomonee Falls, the police chief of Menomonee Falls, I'm not sure what school your kids attend, has been interested in that for many years. As a matter of fact, they've been doing drills for almost 10 years. So going forward, there has been additional funds both at the federal level and the state level to make sure there's additional funding for schools. But I also think that a larger conversation for our kids, they have to have the conversation that if they see something, they have to say something. The kids are the ones that see a lot of things on the internet, and as far as Facebook and Instagram and all of those things, they're going to have to be a first line for if they have a concern, they need to talk to a parent, a teacher, and probably a principal to make sure if they have students in the classroom that they think are being violent or saying terrible things. I mean, this is going to require all of us to work together.
Well, a lot of times they know who it is. I mean, there's a few at every school have mental issues. I mean, they know who they are. And our schools are not locked down. I mean, they can get indoors, people let them in, you know. So, you know, our resource officer pretty much knows who a couple of the problematic kids are, but they can get in, and you know, they're tied. The mental health, they can't take them anywhere. We had one instance, and the mental health just refused to deal with him. So he's stuck with this, you know, kid. That is a danger to people. So they don't know what to do with them. The cops have no resource to take some of these people. That's my concern on that end. You know, the drills, I mean, the shooting's over in a few minutes, usually, 10 minutes. So drills, yeah, they help, but, you know, locking doors, cameras, you know, hard lockdown stuff is what I want to see, you know.
And those dollars have been there both at the federal and the state level to add to the security. But I do want to, in Waukesha County, we do have a really good mental health system. And I don't know when you're saying they have.
It was Waukesha, and they turned them away. They're overwhelmed, you know,
Okay,
so.
well, you know, let me add on to this. The current law forcing someone with mental health issues is you have to be a danger to yourself or a danger to others. And the only way you convince a judge to be a danger to others is to harm somebody. So, you know, this is kind of after the fact. We ought to change that. Now, there are a couple of things I think we should do. You know, one is we should change the law to allow either school or law enforcement or mental health people to petition a court to put a temporary block on somebody like you have described, who has shown a propensity maybe to cause harm to somebody in the future but hasn't caused harm to somebody yet. If you put that block on the NICS system, you know, then they're not going to be able to obtain firearms or obtain ammunition because that will show up. You know, we have to do this before it happens rather than afterwards. And, you know, in this country, we do the due process first rather than second. The second thing that I think needs to be done is to have a thorough review of what the mental health laws are, because you have to, you know, actually harm somebody else to be a danger to others. You know, is a loophole wide enough to drive an 18-wheeler through. And we've had a number of tragedies that have occurred because people have shown that they may have mental health problems, but you can't even get them evaluated if they don't want to be evaluated until they actually harm somebody. That has got to change. Now, the final thing I would point out is that my crime subcommittee had a hearing a couple months ago where the deputy director of the FBI appeared and spoke about the kid, Nicholas Cruz, who shot up the high school in Florida. And that happened in February. In November, there was somebody who was surfing the web and found out in a Facebook post that there was a Nicholas Cruz to put up on the web that he wanted to be a professional school shooter. He called up the FBI. The FBI sent a special agent and a computer geek out to see him. This was in Mississippi. And they took down the information, but they couldn't prove that Nicholas Cruz was the correct name or an alias. Now, fast forward until after New Year's, there was somebody in Cruz's neighborhood in Florida that called up the FBI and said there had been 39 911 domestic violence calls that the local police had responded to. And what happened there is that the FBI said, well, this is something that there's no federal nexus to. This is a local law enforcement function. And as a result, the FBI didn't put it into the computer where it could have been matched up with the November information that came about as a result of the contact in Mississippi. The deputy director of the FBI said, we're at fault. Something fell through the cracks here. And it's the first time in all the years that I've had in Congress where the FBI has come in and admitted it made a mistake.
Well, our resource officer knows, and he's frustrated. You know, he's a Waukesha County sheriff, and he has nowhere to go with these kids. I mean, you know, he's a full-time, you know, resource
Well,
officer.
you know, again, the law says...
He's walking around with a knife.
Again, the law says that, you know, in order to do something about it, the person who has got a mental problem actually has to harm somebody. And, you know, he's frustrated, and the law should be changed on that. You know, you shouldn't get what amounts to a free massacre before something can be done about the fact that you're screwed up mentally.
Well, and you see that depression is up, I mean, 30% in the last decade or so, or 2 decades, and mental health is just,
Yeah.
suicides are up, and it
Okay.
doesn't seem like it's gonna get better.
Well, I've told you what the law is, and, it can get better if we change the law. And, I think I said how to do it. Jim Brundage, Apple Valley Drive, calls.
Howdy, nice to see you again, Tom.
Thank you.
I've got a question, maybe a follow-up. As I think everybody in the country knows, we seem to be starting a trade war with the rest of the world. I know that the trade system today has existed in recent years is very, very unfair, but history shows us that every trade war that ever happened, there's no winners, everybody loses. And so, and basically, this trade war being fought by imposing tariffs or a type of tax. And it's been a long time since I was in school, but my recollection is that taxes are imposed by Congress, not by the president. And so I'm wondering why the president is starting this without any, as far as I know.
First of all, repeated trade wars have given the president the power to unilaterally impose tariffs. Whether it's a so-called countervailing tariff because a foreign country has a government subsidy to dump their products below cost in the American market, which happens all the time. China is a big offender in that one, so is Korea on that, or for whatever other purpose. I can tell you that I was one of 101 Republican congressmen that wrote both the president and trade negotiator Lighthizer saying that the tariffs that were being proposed were a bad idea. And I hold to that position because the retaliation that goes on, as a result of that is going to hurt American manufacturing. It is, for example, the tariffs on Canadian aluminum, will add at least a penny to the cost of every can of beer. Talking about hitting home on that. However, if Congress does pass a bill, the president will veto it, and I can tell you there's no way that kind of a veto will be overridden.
Thank you.
Okay. Les Ibach, McClellan Court Falls.
You believe that Kim Jong-un will denuclearize North Korea?
Well, let me say that's been the goal of every American president since Bill Clinton. Clinton and George W. Bush reached a deal with the royal family of North Korea. They got our money, they got food when the people were starving. Once the heat was off, the Kim family ended up breaking the deal and continuing their nuclear program. Now, what I can say is the only way that any denuclearization deal will work is if there is a transparent and effective verification system that will make sure that the North Koreans are not cheating on whatever they promise, if they do promise anything. And there's a way to do it, which I have advocated people both in Korea and in Japan. And that is to copy the verification deal that Reagan and Gorbachev reached when they reached the agreement to get rid of intermediate range missiles in the 1980s. And since that time, there have been Russians that have been able to go anywhere in the United States and show up without notice to make sure that there have been no violations on our part, and Americans that have been able to go anywhere, first in the former Soviet Union and now in Russia, to make sure that they aren't cheating. This has worked. There has never been an allegation on either side that the other side is cheating. And this is something that I have very forcefully advocated to both the Japanese and the South Koreans. I can tell you the South Koreans, have been very, very interested in that. And while I have not talked to President Moon about it, I have talked to the foreign minister and the CIA director of South Korea, and they think that that's the way to go. And, you know, there's nothing that we can do in terms of a bilateral agreement between us and Kim Jong-un that should undercut the South Koreans, because they've got more involved in this, you know, a greater stake in this than we do.
Kim Jong-un seems to be reaching out. Is he wanting North Korea to become a member of the community of nations?
Well, you know, that remains to be seen. It certainly is not genetic, because both his father and grandfather didn't want that. However, the North Korean economy is a basket case. You know, people are starving there, even those that don't live in the gulags, and the human rights violations in North Korea are the worst in the world on that. You know, this is kind of, you know, all wrapped into it. And, you know, I do think that this is going to require more than one summit, you know. You know, the fairy godfather is not going to wave his wand and, you know, everything is going to be fine. Because that's the mistake that both Clinton and George W. Bush made, you know, on that. But we'll see, you know, what kind of a start there is. You know, I think he's going to want diplomatic recognition, which would mean that we would open up an embassy in North Korea. You know, if he has some concessions, and then not just on the nuclear issue, but on the human rights issue, you know, I don't have a problem with that. You know, I think, you know, when it comes to money, you know, you've got to follow the money. And since he's already gotten some, the money ought to come after the denuclearization and not before, because we did it the other way once and lost a lot of money on that.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Don Bach, Shagbark Road Falls.
I'd like to speak to another issue that I think many of us in this room are concerned about, and that's the issue of illegal immigration. And my little 4-point notes that I brought out is, first of all, we believe it's out of control. We have concern about the abuse of our social benefit systems that are paying these illegal immigrants. We have a concern about people that refuse to call them illegal when they are, in fact, they're not undocumented. They are illegal. We are 100% against sanctuary cities. We think that's an awful way to solve the problem. And we'd like to know, when will we regain the control of our borders? And when will the migrants be returned to the places they came from?
Well, that's probably, you know, one of the most vexatious issues that we are facing, you know. Let me say my bottom line is no amnesty. You know, amnesty gives a benefit to people who broke our law and actually harms people who have been obeying the law, applying for a visa and waiting very patiently for their name to get up to the top of the list. We gave an amnesty in 1986. This was after a blue ribbon commission that was headed by Father Hesburgh of Notre Dame, who is a self-admitted liberal, who said if we give amnesty, it will only encourage more illegal immigration. He was right. Reagan was wrong when he signed the bill. And we had 3 to 3.5 million illegal immigrants then. We now have from between 11 to 20 million immigrants, and nobody knows exactly what the number is. Now, you know, there is a move in Congress that may come to a head next week, not this week, but next week, you know, relative to the DACA kids. And, you know, the thing is a lot of the DACA kids have been here for a long time. And I do not have a problem in allowing them to stay here with temporary but renewable work permits, but not give them a pathway to citizenship. And the reason that giving them a pathway to citizenship is a Trojan horse is because once they become citizens, then they can petition to bring in their parents who broke the law in the first place and brought them here when they were children. And we get to the whole issue of chain migration. So pathway to citizenship means that without getting rid of chain migration, means that we are just increasing the problems that we have with chain migration. I also have a problem, you know, that if we give them citizenship but not petitioning rights, then there are two classes of American citizenship. That would be the first time in the history of the country where we had that. You and that is a precedent that I think is going to have a lot of unexpected consequences. Now, Trump has been very plain, in saying that he is not going to sign any kind of relief for the DACA kids unless he gets his border security fully funded. That is not exclusively a wall anymore. He has backed down on that. He says build the wall where the wall can be patrolled, because if you build a wall where it can't be patrolled, people will bust through it, dig under it, or jump over it. Where it can be patrolled, and then do high-tech stuff in places like in the mountains where it can't be patrolled because the terrain is too rough. One of the proposals that I think has merits along the Rio Grande, is to have a levee with fairly steep walls and about a 3-foot fence on the top, and that would deter illegal crossings of the river, which can either be a torrent or a trickle. And I've been down there and seen it both, but also would have a great deal of benefit in terms of flood control in the floodplain, on our side of the border. So, Trump is going to be insistent on that. Now, he put that proposal up, I believe, in March, and Senator Schumer rejected it, and the Democrats filibustered it together with the DACA relief, and it didn't pass, and then Trump pulled it off the table. So I guess it all depends upon, whether we're going to see some flexibility on the part of the minority party, because if there's no flexibility, and what happened in March is repeated next week, then you're going to be seeing the Democrats putting their opposition to any kind of border barriers, whether it's a wall, a levee, or high-tech stuff, ahead of their support for the DACA kids. And they will have to explain that. I will not try to. As far as sanctuary cities are concerned, I have supported legislation which passed the House and died in the Senate, that takes away federal law enforcement grants to sanctuary cities. I'm kind of a historian. It seems to me that when there were cities and states that decided to ignore federal law and reject them, we had a civil war as a result of that. Because that's what the southern states attempted to do 160 years ago as the way to protect the institution of slavery. The good guys won that war. L. Carnath, Menomonee River Parkway in the Falls.
Yes, I'd like to know your ideas and feelings about the pending ideas on Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security funding. Those of us that are our age that are already on it are going to be all right, but I get concerned about the future for our children, grandchildren.
Well, let me say there's no bill that has been introduced that has been seriously considered to deal with Medicare and Social Security. With Medicaid, there's legislation that I don't think is a bad idea, that basically turns the Medicaid program into something that's run by the states. They run a good part of it now with a huge block grant, in order to make up for the federal money that's lost under the current cost-sharing program. And, I say this because each state has got different problems in providing a social safety net for poor people, which is what Medicaid was designed to protect against. Our problems in Wisconsin are not the same in New York City or the same in the Mississippi Delta. And I have, a lot more confidence in the Wisconsin legislature coming up with a Medicaid program that will be good for the people of the state of Wisconsin, better administered than the federal directed program is, targeting the aid to where it is needed, and perhaps saving some money in the short and medium term. Now, let me talk a little bit about Medicare. There are 4 different parts of Medicare: A, B, C, and D. B is financed not by payroll taxes through the trust fund, but by general tax revenue. C, which is Medicare Advantage, is funded by those seniors that decide to elect to go to Medicare Advantage. assigning their Medicare A and B benefits to the Advantage carrier. And B is paid for partially by the government, but mainly by the beneficiary, and that's prescription drugs. Now, last week, the Social Security trustees gave us a report on the fiscal health of Social Security. And Medicare A, the hospitalization part, the date where it goes broke was advanced 3 years from 2027 to 2024. Now, I don't think that Congress is going to deal with that issue until after the election and the new Congress is seated. But we better start dealing with it quickly and figuring out how to fix that problem, because next year, 2024, is 5 years away, and the wolf is approaching the door, licking its chops. And it's better to get rid of the wolf before it's at the door. Jefferson Davis, Sheridan Drive, and Menomonee Falls.
Thank you, Congressman. You've asked us for comments or questions. I'm just going to make some very brief comments out of respect to the folks that are here that would also like to speak. But before I do, thank you, Representative Brancham, for being here. Thank you for your leadership on Foxconn and all those wonderful jobs and unbelievable taxes that are going to come and help our economy. Thank you for your leadership in supporting Act 10. Our schools are stronger, our communities are stronger, our public works. You know, we had all the naysayers that our state was going to fall and collapse. It hasn't. My taxes are lower now than they were 8 years ago, so thank you. Congressman, my brief comments come in these three contexts. 1, the economy, 2, judicial, and 3, national security. First of all, the economy. Who would have ever thought that we would have more job openings in this country, according to the Department of Bureau of Labor, than we have people that want a job? That's unheard of. Our growth is going to come to 4% here, it's projected in the next quarter. We have revenue coming in because of the tax plan reform that you supported, most states and the federal coffers, than we've ever seen before. And those that said, oh my gosh, it's going to ruin this country, just the opposite is happening. It's getting better. So from an economic standpoint, thank you. From a judicial standpoint, Justice Gorsuch is working out great on the Supreme Court. We hope that we can get a good conservative replacement for Justice Kennedy if he retires this summer. And also the appellate courts and all the lower levels, all of the appointments that have been made by the President and confirmed by the Senate. Thank you very much for doing that. We appreciate constructionists and not those that make laws from the bench. So thank you for that. And finally, very briefly, for the national security. Thank you that we are finally getting money back into our military where our tanks can be driven, our planes can be flown, our ships can sail, and our military people that put their life on the line every single day so that we can come here tonight and be part of this town hall. Thank you for supporting and restoring our military. And also, a gentleman commented on immigration. Thank you for your support on that. It's about time that we get someone that has the courage and the leadership and the conviction to make that happen. And finally, let me say this. Your staff is approachable, they're accessible, and they're accommodating. Thank you for having such wonderful people that support you. And thank you again for being here tonight.
Thank you. Denise Cook, McClellan Court Falls.
Hi, I'm Denise Cook. I live in Menomonee Falls. I know you're very fond of giving history lessons with your answers. I can assure you I don't need a history lesson on this comment question, but if you want to put it in historical context for the rest of the people here, that'd be fine. Have you no sense of decency, sir?
I do, and what I will say is that I'm getting a little sick of the name calling of people who don't agree with conservative or Republican principles. And saying that someone is indecent because they disagree with anybody on a political issue is not democratic with a small d. You know, if we look at what has happened, around the world, when people are shouted down, when people are intimidated, when people's opposing views are not respected, democracy is hurt, and in some cases, democracy is killed. Please think about that.
The last I checked, all of us here are your boss.
I'm elected for a 2-year term. I put my record on the line every 2 years, as does Representative Brancham. I represent about 730,000 people. I don't expect all of those people to agree with me all the time. Even my wife doesn't do that. On that. There's sometimes I come home and she says, why did you vote the way you did? But I do think that for people who would vote the other way, if they had this office, they are entitled to an explanation of why I take the position I do. And sometimes it requires a little bit of historical context. Because Winston Churchill, I believe, said that those who do not learn from the mistakes of history are bound to repeat them. Churchill was very right on that. So, every 2 years I put things on the line. I have 730,000 bosses, so to speak, who live in the 5th Congressional District. I try to do the best job I can to vote with the majority of the people, a majority of the time, and it seems to me that given the margins that I have been reelected by, at least in the past, a majority of the people have agreed with the trusteeship that they have given me each time that I have been elected to another term. Ellen Neubauer of Schlafer Drive in the Falls.
I have a short but very important comment. I believe every woman needs to be able to make the choice of whether she can lovingly and financially care for a child if she becomes pregnant. Otherwise, she would become unstable due to the stress of raising a child at that particular time of her life. If given a choice by Planned Parenthood,
Could you please address your comments to the two of us up here?
oh sure. If given a choice by Planned Parenthood as to whether she is able to educate a child for 18 years, she would gain self-esteem and continue on her journey as a productive member of society. It would be helpful if Planned Parenthood could offer some free counseling sessions to women in this situation. I do not agree that supporting Planned Parenthood would lead to mass genocide, as you stated in your letter to me. A few months ago. Please rethink your position on approving funds to support the work of Planned Parenthood. I believe the majority of childbearing age women are decent, respectable, and well-meaning people. I have 3 granddaughters that have used it. One is now happily married with 2 children, but when she was using Planned Parenthood, it would not have been a good thing for her to be pregnant at that time. I urge you to have faith in this group of women also. If you can't do anything legally, I urge you to at least love and respect them and honor them in your own heart. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I have to respectfully disagree with you, on that. And I have made no secret of my pro-life positions throughout my public service, both in the legislature as well as in Congress. Planned Parenthood is the largest abortion provider in the country. Defunding Planned Parenthood is not going to mean less money for women's health, because every proposal to defund Planned Parenthood is to transfer those funds to community health services that do not get involved in abortion, but provide the same type of counseling and the same type of medical treatment and referrals to women who come on in there. You know, I believe that life begins at conception and ends at natural death. And there are about 1.5 million abortions that are performed in this country every year. And Roe versus Wade has been the law of the land now for 45 years. That means that over 60 million babies have been aborted. I think that's a genocide, and I'll leave it at that. Joan Plumley, Countryside Drive in the Falls.
I'd like to speak to the issue of immigration and refugees. I'm concerned that our country is refusing to take asylum seekers when their lives are in danger. Last Sunday at our church, we heard a speaker, a pastor who's from El Salvador, and he was telling us about the amount of gangs and the power of the gangs in El Salvador. There are 30 to 40,000 gang members there. And if the boys, like age 12 or so, do not want to join a gang, they are killed by gang members. And so their parents are kind of stuck between a rock and hard place and try to get their sons out of the country in order to save their lives. Yet if they come to the United States, they are turned away. And that is we are breaking international law that was set up by the United Nations to protect people whose lives are in danger. And this is greatly concerning to me.
Okay, well, I think there's a bit of confusion between refugees and applicants for asylum. There is no United States convention, to my knowledge, on asylum. You know, each country deals with the asylum question according to its own laws. There is a UN convention which practically everybody has signed, including the United States, on refugees. And it defines refugees as someone who has a well-founded fear of political or religious persecution if they return home. People who are leaving because of lawlessness, people who are economic migrants are not included in the definition of refugees according to the UN. And people who get refugee visas are interviewed at embassies and consulates outside the country to see if they qualify before they get a refugee visa. And these are limited in number. Congress does not have a say in the number of them. That is set by the Secretary of State on an annual basis, but he has to come and consult with the two judiciary committees on what the numbers are, and this is divided up by continent. So it all isn't one continent or another continent. With applicants for political asylum, it is different, and they have to have a well-founded fear. And that system has been gamed because what has happened in the past is that the immigration judges who determine whether the claim of a well-founded fear is legitimate or not do it on a first-in, first-out basis. So someone who is told to say, I have a well-founded fear when they get to the border is paroled into the country and is told that they will have to appear before an immigration judge when their name comes up. Now, what happens is that the vast majority of the people who get notices to appear before an immigration judge do not appear. And the judge issues a default deportation or removal order because they didn't appear on that. And, you know, this is the same kind of thing as a bench warrant issued by a judge if any of us would blow off a traffic ticket by neither showing up in court nor paying the fine before the date on the summons that, on the citation that the officer handed people. So there have been a lot of people that have been picked up because they've been here for a while. There was a default order that gets put in to the FBI computer when they're stopped in traffic. You know, they get picked up and turned over to ICE and, you know, either go before the judge or are deported. What has happened recently is that instead of having the system of first in, first out being gained by people who disappear in the country, it's now last in, first out. So somebody who comes across the border, says they have a well-founded fear, they can be put in detention for 72 hours. They go before the judge who is on the border, say what their well-founded fear is, and the judge makes the determination. So this is something that is done through a judicial process and through due process. And the people who are sent back, are those where the judge has made the determination that they do not qualify for asylum in the United States.
Thank you. I'd also like to express my concern about immigration and the way that children are being torn from their parents' arms and separated from their parents, and that, families are being torn apart by this. I think this is just a violation of human rights, of, the foundation of families that we value.
Well, I can say that there is no reason that ICE would act unless there was a valid judicial order calling for their deportation. Now, many of these orders, as I said, are default orders, so the people decided that they did not want to have their day in court for whatever reason. There's nothing against young children being taken with their parents if they happen to be deported, but that's a decision that the parents would have to make.
You mean the parents are deciding to have their children removed from them? Is that what you're saying?
If they're deported, the parents can decide to take their children with them or not. And that's up to the parents, as it should be.
This is new. She's talking about on the border.
Yeah. Richard, Ebert, Nancy, and Samuel.
I'm Richard. I was the one who had asked to speak. The U.S. Senate is controlled by the Republicans. The House of Representatives is controlled by the Republicans. The sitting president is a Republican. I'm wondering when the Republicans are going to align themselves with the president, because I always consider whoever the president is the leader of that party, and it seems we're going to run out of time, or the Republicans are going to run out of time to accomplish the things that the president wants to accomplish, where the Democrats seem to always align themselves together. They kind of get that. How soon do you think the Republicans can get together and accomplish what the president had promised?
The House already has. We passed repeal and replace Obamacare. That got killed in the Senate. We passed tax reform. That got passed in the Senate. We passed a number of important bills that have been signed, recently, including the right to try bill, where terminally ill patients, can try drugs that are, in the process of being tested. These are, all really big things. Where we have a problem is the filibuster rule in the Senate. The split in the Senate is 51-49 now. You need 60 votes to pass practically everything in the Senate. And I was looking, at my cell phone before this meeting came up. There are 503 bills that have been passed by the House of Representatives that the Senate has not had the time to take up. We are doing our job. The Senate, because of obstructionism, is not. And I talked a little bit earlier where there could be something done, for the DACA kids, in exchange for support for funding the physical barriers that Trump has called for, which is not exclusively a wall anymore. What happens? Senator Schumer gets up and says no dice. He has 49 votes. They vote against it, and the bill has to be dropped. So, I guess, look at the way things work. Now, there's not one member of the House, Republican or Democrat, that would not be in favor of the Senate getting rid of their filibuster rule to allow the majority to rule in the United States Senate. But they're kind of proud of the filibuster rule. And, when there's some people who've talked to me about running for the Senate, I give them the same answer that I did when I had that chance in 1988. In the Senate, you can stop anything you want to, but you can't pass anything. In the House, you can pass things, and that's why I stayed in the House.
Thank you.
Eric Hedman, New Berlin.
Well, a couple of things have been bothering me. and it comes to what other people have talked about here. Earlier this year, first time in my life, I served on a jury. And my opinion of the legal system in this country couldn't have fallen faster. It was a disgusting case that should have never been prosecuted. And I looked at, there was a man who owned a restaurant, was trying to protect his kitchen from a drunk patron. And he gets arrested. The police have come in, both said the other one was in charge and neither one interviewed a witness. It was a horrible, no case, and yet it gets prosecuted. He has to go through and had a very impressive attorney. He'd never been arrested before in his life. He's in his 70s. And when you listen to him, the prosecutor, you think the guy had the character of Al Capone. It took us less than a minute to find this guy not guilty. It took longer to find a foreman for the jury. And when I look at, when you talked about school safety, I have a niece who's 16 years old. After the last shooting in Santa Fe, Texas, she was terrified. And I had her, told her, go talk to the principal, ask them if they're going to ask for this money for security for the school. And she did, and they said yes. When we're doing these things, we need competent people to do it. Let's say like for the mental health checks. I've known a number of people in the mental health system. A lot of them, to me, do not come across as competent. So how do we do these things and still get back to doing it right? Because you can throw money at an issue and not solve it. And one thing after another, let's say like immigration, I remember in 1978, Jimmy Carter went to China and was lecturing Zhou Enlai about not letting people who want to leave out. And Zhou Enlai said to him, do you really want 60 million immigrants a year from our country for the next 5 years?
I think Joe, I said I'll send them to you.
Yeah, he did. You look at, like for immigration, on the other side, the people who are in favor. Well, how many are we supposed to take? We've taken since 1963 more immigrants than the rest of the world combined. We can't do it all. We don't have the people to do it. How do we do what we do better? And it just bothers me, especially after seeing this trial. The district attorney's office, the judge actually really impressed me. He told me he had 500 cases on his docket, and more than half of them are opioid related. We're getting overwhelmed by these things. We can pass laws and say we're going to do things. But if we're not doing it right, or if we're not doing it correctly, what good does it do? That's
Well, you know what I can say is that Senator Portman and I, passed the leading bill to combat the opioid addiction crisis, which is severe. We lose more people in this state and this country from opioid addiction than we do in car crashes. That's ghastly.
Yeah.
And this is comprehensive. There's money for counseling. There's money for treatment. There's money for early intervention. There's money for law enforcement. There's money for education. There's money to put the Narcan, anti-opioid, drug in every ambulance, so that when the EMTs come and pick somebody up who's dying as a result of an overdose, they can give them some Narcan, which will keep them going till they get to the ER. We have to work on funding it, and that's going to be one of my top priorities in the next Congress. The other thing we need to do is we need to get after fentanyl analogs. There is no law against fentanyl analogs. There is a law that makes fentanyl a Schedule II narcotic, but the analogs, which are, where the nutty chemist, ends up being able to have, a little bit, different analog. There is no law against that, so people can trade that, scot-free. There's a regulation, emergency regulation that the DEA has put on it. But that's drafted in a way that a very good defense lawyer will be able to get his client off the hook pretty quickly. So this is what the federal government is doing. The state government has got a role, and Attorney General Schimmel has been spending quite a bit of time, and I'll defer to Janelle to talk to what the legislature is doing. But a lot of this has got to be done locally. It's got to be done First of all, with families. You know, my son or my daughter is getting hooked on this stuff. Help. And there will be the resources to get the help to the person who is getting addicted, or to try to bring them back if they're already addicted. We've got to use the schools and the churches on this, you know, basically to educate people that this stuff isn't candy. We have to deal with physicians who overprescribe opioids to their patients. And we have to deal with patients when the doctor says, no more for you, you're getting hooked. They go across the street to the other doctor who has no idea what the previous doctor has prescribed, and he starts writing prescriptions, you know, and it's spiraling, you know, off the abyss that way. So, you know, this is, you know, a complicated problem, you know, that faces the entire country. And we, you know, the whole country, and that means all 310 million of us are going to have to get involved in this. You know, this is not something that's saying, well, you know, let's elect or rely on our elected officials to do it. We're doing what we can, but we need help, and we need help from everybody. Janelle?
And the state of Wisconsin has taken very seriously to the point where we have what's called the HOPE agenda, which is to reduce not only for doctors, which is about 12 different bills. And we've taken part different pieces of this. From the doctors now having a state system, which you go to the emergency room, whatever doctor you go to, and you prescribe those tier of opiate drugs that each doctor has access to that easily. And they know, so you can't doctor shop in the state of Wisconsin anymore. It's become much more difficult. We've also gone through to the high schools and the schools and the rest of even dentists, and now they're prescribing much less. As you would, you know, you normally get 30 pills, it's now less than a week is what you're getting. So there are different rules that we've put in place. We've also tried to address the different chemistry that goes on and made them all illegal, trying to help law enforcement going forward. So yes, there are different pieces to it. We've had several bills moving that forward because honestly we're losing that age group that we're talking about is really 15 to 30. I mean, we're losing a whole generation of young adults.
Well, my nieces know several people who've already died from this. And you see a 16-year-old, you want to think she's growing up in a protected environment, but around her she's seeing people drop over dead from this. And my experience with that trial is as people apply it, Voltaire made the comment, he said, common sense isn't very common. We have to try to, I guess you're right at all levels, everybody try to think a little smarter, do a little bit better, and hopefully we can improve on this.
Thank you. Former Milwaukee County District Attorney E. Michael McCann of Wauwatosa. Mike?
Thank you, Congressman. First, I want to express appreciation for you appearing here on Sunday night. I'm keenly aware that at least half of the week you're separated from your family and you're taking this time. I hope you're not discouraged. It was reported that only one person appeared at Rubicon. I hope that does not discourage you from continuing these programs.
Well,
it's I think I really respect you for putting these out to do this.
it won't.
Good. I'm appearing as a member of the Voice of the Poor Committee of the St. Vincent de Paul Society. This is a group of laypersons, predominantly Catholic, who assist the poor by providing food, clothes, furnishings, and occasionally rent or utility payment assistance. We visit people in their dwellings to assess need. We maintain 2 meal sites in Milwaukee County, which together provided over 100,000 meals last year and support a number of food pantries in Catholic parishes. Service is based on need without regard to race, nationality, gender, or creed. As you know, Vincentians of the Milwaukee Archdiocese reside in Dodge, Milwaukee, Ozaukee, Washington, and Waukesha counties. The Voice of the Poor Committee is charged with expressing the position of the Society on social justice issues. We view the Farm Bill, addressing as it does the needs of so many poor, as morally significant legislation. I'm aware that it was defeated on May 18th, but it was reported, at least in our newspaper, that there was a division, and the issue wasn't as much on the contents of the bill as the desire of some in the majority to force Paul Ryan to bring on an immigration bill before consideration of the Farm Bill, and that the Farm Bill will appear again on the agenda sometime this month for a vote up or down. For that reason, I'm appearing and stating our position on the Farm Bill. I know that on Friday afternoon, the Senate issued its Farm Bill. I have not had an opportunity to study that, but I will over the coming wait. I just want to say that we support and commend the provisions in the current bill, H.R. 2, renewing and funding the Emergency Food Assistance Program, TFAP, and the Commodity Statement Supplemental Food Program, CSFP. We also support provisions in the bill continuing international food security and development, including Food for Peace, McGovern Dole, Food for Progress, and farmer-to-farmer programs. As Vincentians, we have frequent contact with persons on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. That's SNAP, the old food stamps, and have direct knowledge of their situations. We are opposed to the vision of the bill ending state options for broad-based categorical eligibility. We believe that enactment of that provision will result in the removal of as many as 2 million persons from the program. And as I believe you know, the impact will be felt most by working citizens earning between 130 and 200% of the federal poverty level. We also oppose the proposal to increase penalties for failing to meet the SNAP work requirement. For the first offense, from 1 month cutoff to a year cutoff, and for the second offense, from a 3-month cutoff to a 3-year cutoff. We think those penalties are quite severe. This would mean for some people who need food to be deprived of that food. So again, raising it from 1 month penalty to 1 year, raising it from 3 months to 3 years, we think is severe and unreasonable. We are also concerned that the persons who need to get jobs under the program, persons 50 to 60, unemployed persons, will be provided not only a 1 month opening, 1 month period to get those jobs, rather than the current 3 months. We're concerned not only for city people where there may be difficulties, but in rural areas where there's difficulty to travel to programs or where there may be fewer jobs available in the rural areas. I will be attaching, going to make a submission, a joint letter dated April 18, 2018 from the United States Catholic Bishops' Conference, from the Catholic Relief Services, the Catholic Charities USA, Catholic Rural Life, and the St. Vincent de Paul Society, addressed to Congressman Michael Conway, Chairman of the House Agriculture Committee, setting forth positions on the Farm Bill. We are in accord with the provisions of that letter. Thank you again for conducting this town hall meeting in Menomonee Falls and for the consideration we hope you will give. Please.
Well, thank you. Just very briefly, Mike, what I will say is I think there should be a work requirement for able-bodied people who receive SNAP or food stamp benefits. There's been an awful lot of fraud in the food stamp program. The dollar that is wasted due to fraud is a dollar that can't be given to a legitimately in-need person. And that has got to be addressed. We give this to Joe over here.
I sent people to prison for welfare fraud. So
yes. I know you send a lot of people to prison for welfare fraud. Good for you for doing that.
We're not here to oppose the work requirement. We're talking about the penalties and the fact that they have to get to work so quickly in the short term. So if we're in the rural area particularly, I think to get to a job training program, you don't have a car, you live in a small town, 25 miles away. Would you look at those penalties?
By the way, the Farm Bill did increase the value of a car that a SNAP recipient can own to $12,000, so they don't have to drive around, in a beater where you have to pray that it doesn't die between here and there.
You'll see that in the letter we approve that and agree. I do want to say in passing, it didn't come to testify though, but I'm well aware of the prison bill that we just passed and bipartisan support. I know it's before the Senate. I know there's some resistance from Senator Grassley, chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. That's a bipartisan bill, the Sentencing Reform Act of 2017, and I hope you're able to work out with the Senate.
Well, I want to see sentencing reform. I worked for a year and a half with Congressman Bobby Scott in Denver, Virginia, on a criminal justice reform task force, which was very enlightening. And there has to be a package of sentencing reform, in prison work training so that people have skills when they get out of prison, and a second chance program so that once they get out of prison, they don't hang out with the people who got them in trouble in the first place. The prison reform bill only deals with the second of these, although Mark Bellick gave me a lot of heat, because there is a provision where people who are elderly and ill, could be released from prison before their sentence was up, into a supervised setting. And, my point in response to that is somebody who's 80 years old and has a lot of trouble getting around isn't going to hit up to 7-Eleven and run away with their walker.
Mark Belling was not a keen supporter of mine, so.
Okay, but he throws a pie in my face every once in a while too. Carol Harder, Western Avenue, Germantown.
Thank you for your time tonight. Just a couple little comments. The tax cut and jobs bill, I think, is a little misnomer because we don't need job openings as much as we need decent wages for people in terms of the goal to get the basic rate of pay increased. And it gave people one-time bonuses, but not increase their wages. I don't see how that helps the average person. And I've been reading about companies that have used that tax money that they got to buy stocks, so it increases their value on the stock exchange. And they still can send jobs overseas without paying a big penalty. And Harley Davidson is just released some more workers. So I don't agree with the benefits of that bill.
Well, you know, what I can say is I think that this was a significant contributing factor to the fact that the economy is booming, unemployment is low, minority unemployment amongst African Americans and Hispanics is a 17-year low. And, you know, as we've heard with the previous speaker, we have more job openings than unemployed in this country, and it's been a long time, if ever, that has happened. Now, the Congress and the government have nothing to do with wages. We have a free market economy, and it's up to the employers to make a determination on what the wages or the salaries of their employees are. And when you have the government saying how much or how little you can pay, that was kind of like what frayed the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe into becoming economic basket cases. It didn't work there and it won't work here. So, I guess what I can say is I disagree with you. The thing is that there isn't a penalty to send jobs or money overseas. The issue is the penalty for bringing it back. That's where the huge repatriation tax was, which was lowered. And we never would get that $38 billion from Apple if we kept the old tax code, because they would have kept that money overseas, not brought it back, not created new factories. And they said that when all these factories are built, there will be 20,000 new American jobs that are fairly high paid. I think that's a win-win situation. Jane Kyle, 80 Bell Road, Colgate.
Thank you, and thank you for doing these sessions because I really appreciate it. I had a couple of things and following up with the people that are having difficulty, financial difficulty. They have to work 30 hours a week beyond SNAP in Wisconsin and 20 hours maximum for health, Medicaid health insurance through Wisconsin. I don't understand that. How can you can't be on SNAP if you're getting health insurance, Medicaid through the state. And I understand where we want to work.
I'll defer to Representative Branchen on this one. It's a state issue.
So the state of Wisconsin has made the determination that if you are an able-bodied individual, that you should be looking for work for 30 hours during the week. Your second question was?
If you work over 20 hours a week, the state looks at your, what you make and how many hours you've worked, and they will cut off your insurance, your Medicaid insurance.
I'm not aware of any insurance being cut off for certain hours, but you'd have to give me a more specific case for me to be able to answer
Well,
that.
I can do that, but it's a
Sure,
private
that would be
case.
great.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question was, I had a similar question to Joanne had here, was when we're looking at taking these children away from these people that have come up from El Salvador, and we're putting them in an old closed down Walmart on the border, whatever we're doing, it makes no sense to me of why we're taking them away from these parents, and they're not going to be able to get hearings in a timely fashion like you were talking about. I think we understand that, but we don't understand why these children, Jeff Sessions has agreed that these children should be pulled away from their parents.
You know, the change from first in, first out to last in, first out is fairly new. It's been less than a month, you know. So people who come across, you know, now and who claim asylum, they'll be first in line to tell their story to the judge, and the judge will decide. And, you know, as far as allegations that children are being taken away from their parents, I think I already answered that question.
Well, the kids, I mean, there's been documentation that these kids are separated from their parents and they're in a facility without their parents. And maybe that's not true. Then I would ask you to look into that.
Okay. Mary Ann Hoopel, Homestead Drive in the Falls. Ms. Hoopel. Ms. Hoopel still here? Going once, going twice. David Yankee, Tall Oaks Drive, Brookfield.
Listen, I was a small businessman, I was also a medical practitioner. I lived with thousands of pages of laws every single day of my life. I tried to honor them. Sometimes I get the impression we have one set of laws for us little people, and in Washington, we seem to tolerate corruption in both parties, and nothing seems to ever happen. We, the Republicans, scream, lock her up. And I'm not opposed to that, because when Hillary flew to help buy out UBS Bank, it saved them hundreds of billions of dollars, and the UBS Bank gave Bill $1.5 million to come have a chat. If that wasn't legal, it should have been legal. Now, if we're going to lose our ability to complain about what the Democrats did, because, gosh, I thought we had an emoluments clause. Our president is negotiating with China as China gives his daughter extraordinarily valuable trademarks. Our president has an interest and is going to make millions of dollars with his name on a development in Indonesia, which is, being built with a $500 million loan from China. Our president has a hotel right down the street which charges exorbitant prices, and foreign companies go there, countries, because they want to think it'll please the president, and we do nothing. Why are the Republicans, how can we complain about the Democrats not, holding their people to account when we don't seem to be told?
Well, you know what I can say is this, first of all, Trump has said that he will give any profits of foreign governments staying at any of his hotels back to the Treasury.
Yeah, right.
So he's not keeping the books.
Well, all I can say is that, he has directed that to take place. And, I know he's not keeping the books, but he never kept the books for, any of the hotels. He has directed that, and his children, who are actually running the Trump enterprises, have the responsibility to make sure that that happens. Now, we Republicans have been complaining about, unequal, application of the law, where you had Jim Comey say that Hillary was not going to be prosecuted before he even interviewed Mrs. Clinton, where we've had a special counsel investigation, that has been going on kind of in secret, for over a year. And what the special counsel was appointed to do, there haven't been any indictments about, alleged collusion. What I can say is, speaking for the House of Representatives, there is a bipartisan enforcement of common sense and common decency. Republican and Democratic members who have been involved in sexual harassment have been forced to resign by their respective leadership, without exception. And, I could name them if you want me to, but I think we all know who they are. And, this is even before there's an ethics committee investigation. Whoever their party leadership has called them up, and they said, time's up, buddy. And usually there is a resignation that is submitted before our close of business that day. That's the way it ought to work. But, when you're dealing with people who've got civil service protection, or people who are appointed by fixed terms, So it takes a little bit longer to get rid of them when, they have broken the law. I have voted for practically every whistleblower's protection bill that has come up and have sponsored, a few of them that have actually passed and become law. The way you have confidence in the government is weeding out the bad apples before they spoil the whole barrel. And, I'm committed to that. I guess the thing that I will, finally sound off on is that any member of Congress who is convicted of a felony by a jury, the next day I have an expulsion resolution ready to go, because felons belong in jail, they don't belong in Congress. And the last one that was convicted of a felony, because he stonewalled it, was a man named Chaka Fattah from Philadelphia. And he was convicted. I had the resolution ready to go. I said that it was a day that we were about ready to adjourn for a summer recess. I said, if we have to stay here until 6 in the morning, we're going to debate this and we're going to vote on this. Well, lo and behold, the senior Democrat from Philadelphia came up with a letter of resignation and handed it to me within about 3 hours. The guy was gone, off the payroll, no benefits, except those that he would get as a prisoner of the federal government.
But the fundamental question is, the president is saying he's receiving direct benefits from foreign governments and nothing's happening.
Well,
Jared Kushner is running all of his world using his government position to line up hundreds of millions of dollars of cash for his failing business, and nothing happens.
Sir, that's a criminal offense, what you have just said. The president, has business interests. Since the beginning days of the Republic, no president has been forced to divest himself of his business interests. Now, he's got more of them and more complicated ones of them. But remember back when George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were not required to free their slaves to become president of the United States. So they still had their business interests, even though they were, using, involuntary laborers to be able to do that. Now, if he has committed a crime, the Public Integrity Division of the Department of Justice is very active in investigating those kinds of things. But, to say that because the president's daughter, who is an emancipated, not minor, ends up getting trademarks, is the reason that the president should not go to China and talk to the president of China and other Chinese government officials or host them when they come here, goes back to isolationism. And, we are a world power and we ought to talk to people. Not that we would agree with them. Good Lord, in a couple of days, the president is going to be talking to the leader of a country that has agreed with us on nothing for the last 70 years. Peggy Reeder, Fond du Lac Avenue, Germantown.
Thank you for having these meetings, I appreciate that. I had several questions, but I guess I'll go with, the president has been aligning himself more and more with Russia. One, in that he's not enforcing all the sanctions that Congress passed. Number two, he's not getting tough with Putin about tampering with our election. He's not prioritizing attention to see that the cyber attacks are defended, and now he's asking for Russia to be included in the GC summit. Doesn't any of this concern you?
Well, I'm no friend of Russia, and I think Vladimir Putin's a thug. He wants to reinstate the Soviet Union in the bad old days. He's annexed Crimea, which was a part of Ukraine. He has taken the eastern part of Ukraine. The 3 Baltic republics that border on Russia, are extremely nervous that they are next. Let me say this, however. I have always taken the position that having better relations with Russia is in the interest of the United States. And remember, it was Nixon and Reagan that negotiated arms control treaties with Russia that helped bring about the end of the Cold War, Republican presidents, I might add on that. So, putting Russia in the deep freeze when there is a way to get, better relations with him I think is a mistake, because if we put them in the deep freeze, things will keep on spiraling downward and downward and downward. And Putin has been spending an awful lot of time building up his military from when it fell apart, in the last days of the Soviet Union and the first days after the Soviet Union collapsed. So he wants to be, a first-rate military power. I think one of the things that we have to do is be very careful that he does not have an economic chokehold over our allies in Western Europe, particularly through the sale of natural gas there, which is one of the reasons why the Germans get very, very skittish when we talk about getting tough with Putin and the Russians. But, it wasn't too long ago when the Republicans were the hardliners and the Democrats said we ought to get along better with Russia. I think that, what we ought to do is look at it on an issue-by-issue basis and in the context of where America is at any point in time, rather than having inflexible positions, whereas if the Democrats are in, the Republicans say the Russians are bad, 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 and if the Republicans and Donald Trump is in, the Democrats say the same thing. And then when the outs come in and the ins go out, then everything gets flipped. That would be confusing in the Kremlin, I think. We ought to have a consistent foreign policy.
Might I ask, are you okay that they interfered with our elections? Should we not?
No, they should not do that. But I would point out that Green Party candidate Jill Stein petitioned for a complete ballot-by-ballot recount in Wisconsin after the last presidential election and paid for it. So there was no taxpayers' money in there. There was no sign whatsoever that anybody tampered, with anything to do with...
That doesn't matter. I'm talking about...
Well, what do you mean it doesn't matter? There were about 4.5 million ballots that were cast, and none of them looked fishy. And, the clerks all around the state, have to go through them all and see what happened. Now, Russian interfering with democratic elections is nothing new. It has gone back to Soviet times. I remember, that the Russians moved heaven and earth to try to prevent Reagan from winning both times. They've been into the German election. They've been into Brexit. They supported through loans from state-controlled banks the far right-wing anti-immigrant National Front Party in the last French presidential election. We are doing, what we can to prevent this, but you have to remember that under Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution, the states run the elections. The federal government doesn't. And the Constitution is pretty plain on that. Archie Reeder, same address. And this will be the last one before we go to personal problems time.
When I got here, I thought about what it was that I'd like to speak about. And a lot of the topics have been touched on. One that hasn't is ZTE. And the gentleman that mentioned the emoluments clause, it's odd that Ivanka got the trademarks 4 or 5 days before the president stands up and says, geez, we've got to save those Chinese jobs and reduce the sanctions against China.
We don't have any sanctions against China. We have tariffs against China.
Oh, which is a sanction. Did we not take action against ZTE because they were giving information to North Korea and Iran? What action was taken to
that? That was a violation of sanctions against North Korea and Iran.
And we took action against ZTE accordingly.
Yes, and that is an executive branch decision. Now, they had a chance to plead their case. Congress has nothing to do with that issue. That's entirely an executive branch issue. If they pled their case and were able to convince the Secretary of Commerce and the Trade Representative that they weren't guilty, then the sanctions should have gone off.
And either way, if Ivanka gets trademarks, the president gets a $500 million.
Well, now, sir, with all due respect, if Ivanka was determined to deserve a trademark, should she be denied a trademark because her father happens to be the President of the United States?
Perhaps.
That's not equal justice under law. If you if you fulfill the requirements for a trademark in this country or any other country, you get the trademark. You know, that's a protection of intellectual property rights, is what your trademark is. And to say because for a political reason, which is extraneous completely, you know, from the intellectual property protection law, that somebody shouldn't get a trademark, you know, honestly, sir, you know, I think is saying that because she happens to be the daughter of the president, she is not entitled to something that she's legally entitled to under Chinese law. That's wrong.
She's an officer of the executive branch. She is an advisor to the executive branch.
So what? So what? So what? You know, there are people who work for the University of Wisconsin system that get trademarks and copyrights for their invention.
Clearly, I'm not going to change your mind. Other issues.
No. Again, I'm standing up for the rule of law.
And
I'm not for bending it and twisting it because we don't like a politician.
Okay.
And that's what you're trying to do, sir.
And you've taken that position consistently when I come to meetings. When we look at the government today, January 17th last year, you said that there's been no collusion or there's been no collusion, or with the other charge, obstruction. There's been no collusion or obstruction charge from the Mueller committee. No, but you've had 4 people that have agreed and turned state's witness. They're speaking with Mueller because they have violated the law. And consistently we hear.
And what have they violated the law on? It was things that Mr. Manafort did even before Trump announced he was a candidate for President of the United States.
And General Flynn?
General Flynn pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI on a question they didn't ask. And the reason he pleaded guilty is because he would have been bankrupted to defend himself. You know, that's not being fair either, where you have the largest law firm in the world, the United States Department of Justice, going after a person who is living on a retired lieutenant general's pension. He's lost his house. He's almost bankrupt now, and it was for pleading guilty to lying to the FBI on a question they never asked him. Now, come on now, you gotta be fair, and that's not being fair.
How is it fair to say the general doesn't have the money to support it, so he has to plead guilty, when you have a complete judicial system where people can't afford what they're doing either. They can't afford to buy the best lawyers. You get the best justice you can buy. Another point, Scott Pruitt. Where are you at with Scott Pruitt?
Scott Pruitt can be fired by the president anytime the president wants to fire him.
What's your opinion of Scott Pruitt?
I think he has had some severe lapses of judgment in his personal life.
The last question I have, the involvement of the Russians on the June 16th meeting with Kushner, Manafort, Donald Jr., and multiple Russians, looking at dirt on Hillary. When the UAE and Saudi came and again offered foreign money, none of these meetings were identified in the initial revelations when they went into office. Manafort filed as a retroactive agent. Jared Kushner denied that there were meetings. Oh, yeah, geez, and this list of 103 people, yeah, I did meet with them over time. How did they get away with that? The gentleman over here that talked about 2 different sets of rules, that's certainly
all I
one
can
set
say
of
is
rules.
the investigation is ongoing.
Which you do not favor. It's been going on for a year, is what you said.
Yeah, it's been going on for a year. They haven't come up with an indictment on anything that they were appointed to look at and spent $17 million.
How much
That's a lot of money.
Watergate?
What?
Watergate took 4 years. Benghazi took 2 years. There were no indictments from either of those.
All I can say is that, with Watergate, there were criminal activities and there were indictments.
There were a lot of pleas.
Please. As I seem to recall from Watergate, the plumbers spent a lot of time behind bars. Those were indictments from Watergate, directly involved with Watergate. There has not been an indictment from Mueller and his team on Russian collusion in the election to date against anybody.
Yeah. I understand your position that the president was elected to be our president. It doesn't seem as if there's an issue that's been raised this evening that you'll stand up and say, you know, he really missed on that one.
How about tariffs, sir? Or weren't you listening?
Yes, yes I was.
Okay, thank you.
One.
Okay. This concludes the time we have for the general issues. I would like to talk to those of you, and I know